You got the cute way of walking. You got the better of me. How's that? Hey, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. This is episode 107. Leo Sayer. Here we go. My guest today is Leo Sayer. Leo needs no introduction, really, so I'm going to keep this intro brief so we can rip into the conversation. I mean, you know the songs. You make me feel like dancing, When I Need You, More Than I Can Say, Thunder in My Heart, and the list goes on. You just got to Google him and you'll find everything you need to know about his extremely impressive career. We're going to talk about the making of some of these songs, working with the best of the best LA studio musicians through the 70s and 80s, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. Look, I'm already talking too much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with the great honour that I bring you this chat with the one, the only, Mr. Leo Sayer.
One step, just one step at a time.
Let's kick it off. So I think we're rolling. Leo Sayer, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast.
Hello, mate. A pleasure to be here.
Mate, stoked you're here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
We're not in the same room together. I'm in Sydney, and you're down the Southern Highlands. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Berrima, which is near Bowral, and deep in the Southern Highlands. And I've got the joy of living in a little village here, where we only have 400 people. Amongst them is Jimmy Barnes.
Yep.
And his daughter Mahalia. They live here as well, so I see Jim a lot. I suppose there's quite a few musicians around here, we're very blessed to be in a quiet area during this CV time, and of course with COVID time. And as you know, I've got my own studio here, so that's the joy. I can work, on stuff here. So this year is not going idle for me, even if we can't tour. I can still do lots of work, which is great.
Yeah. And before we hit record, you gave me the virtual tour.
And I'll tell you what, I'm going to quickly turn these fans off because you might be getting a humming in the background. Oh. There. Now that should be good studio silence.
Beautiful. Now, I want to give a shout out to Gordy Rittmeister.
Yes, my good mate, Gordy.
Yeah, Gordy contacted me a couple of days after Christmas. And
sent me a message, yeah. We were actually working on the Christmas Carols show. It was very weird this year because they couldn't have an audience, and I was really pleased to see, as he's nearly always in the drum chair. But I walked over and there's my old mate Gordy, and we played so much in the past. I mean, I usually play live with Mark Kennedy, who's another person you've got to get on this, and I'm going to introduce you to him.
Man, I've been. If you can make
instantly. He's ready. We talk every day. We're very, very close. And the stories he has of all the records he's been on, from Max Merritt to Brian Cadd to Billy, just everyone. He's legend.
Yep.
And he'll have some amazing Australian recording stories. I don't have many Australian recording stories. I've got a few, over the years, but mostly it's been America and England,
Yeah, well, if you can hook that up with me and Mark, that'd just be great.
It's done. I was going to call him today, and you put you guys together on email and phones.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd really appreciate that. So what I thought we might talk a bit about, how COVID's been to you and what you were doing leading up to COVID, and then what sort of got blown out. Talk a little bit about that, and then we can roll back, talk about some of your early stuff. And I want to talk to you about your days in the US studios playing with, the
big
American AT.
Yeah,
man. That'd be cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how what were you up to just leading up to COVID and what?
Well, we
dealt
started the year, you know, I don't know if you know John Waters, the guitarist and actor, you know, who John, my year started off like on Christmas Day when John called me and the bushfires were going on and said, look, I think we should do something about this because me and he are quite close. He lives in Robertson in New South Wales, and he's got a great mate who's like head of one of the local fire, the local RFS, you know, local rural fire service. And he's one of the heads, and he had him there for his Christmas dinner table. And they're phoning me and they're saying, Leo, let's put on a show. So the year started on January the 7th, where we're doing a bushfire show. And that was in Bowral. We had an amazing turnout. We had Daryl Braithwaite, John Paul Young, Jeff Duff, amongst many others who came and played for us. It was quite incredible. So that's how the year started with the bushfire. And then I was due to go to play some shows in England and Ireland. So I was kind of halfway through an Irish tour. We did about 4 or 5 shows over there, and we were in Limerick on the way to Cork, right down the bottom, when the Irish government said, right, no more gatherings over 200 people. It's too dangerous with the pandemic. So I had to hot-foot it back to England, and then back to Australia. I waited by Heathrow Airport for a plane, and basically got on that. And then I was my lovely partner Donatella out here in the Highlands. I didn't have to do the hotel lockdown, so I got out of that. Okay. But it meant that we postponed the rest of the Irish tour, which was Cork, Dublin, and Belfast. Now, we're supposed to pick those up in September, and fingers crossed, of course, we can fly. I mean, I'm hoping that I can get a vaccine so I can be safe to be there. It's all an English band there, English crew, English gear, you know, it's all an English and an Irish promoter. So, you know, it's just me going over and joining them for that. And then after that, I've got a British tour in October. And then I work with, I don't know, you know, Jules Holland, the keyboard player. Yeah, I'm doing Jules' tour as well. So as a guest of Jules, that means like 4 nights at the Albert Hall in November, which is going to be bloody stunning. That's me and Lulu again doing that one. Right. So, and Chris Difford from Squeeze, and, you know, a few old friends. And of course, everybody in his band is awesome. So, so I've that's been postponed from last year. So this is the effect of COVID, and my British tour has been postponed as well. So hopefully that all goes on. But that's the live side. I mean, I have a band in Australia, which is Bill Risby, who you know, Mark Kennedy on drums, Mitch Cairns on bass, who's also produced Russell Morris, you know, in the past. And Paul Burton, obviously amazing Sydney guitarist who everybody knows, who does all the Let It Be and the Beatles shows as well as me, you know. So I have a fantastic, just 4 guys, but it's an amazing band. Half in Melbourne, half in Sydney, you know, because Mitch and Mark are in Melbourne, and, you know, we have this joke that the stage is split in half, and the Sydney side, it actually looks like it's like, and we sometimes put a line down and we go Sydney, Melbourne.
Yeah, because Bill faces
he's
side
if
on,
you're looking on the stage, then look left and you'll see far left and you'll see Bill. Yeah, and he tends to face in because we have a kind of horseshoe effect. And then next over is Paul Burton, who's back a little bit because of the volume of the guitars. You know, it's just that kind of thing. So we don't have to screen them off. And then there's a kind of gap in the middle where my harmonica amp is, and a few things like that. And then and then next you come to Mark Kennedy facing in, kind of slightly at an angle, and then Mitch Cairns on the end. And Mitch and Bill and Paul all sing as well. So, you know, we got microphones up for them. So, you know, and they love doing it. I never even knew Bill Risby could sing until one day he just suddenly said, "Give me a microphone," and that was it. Bang. That's typical Risby surprise.
Yeah. I just want to. We're going to bounce around a bit if that's okay.
Yeah, no,
there's no structure to this. I was going to ask you a little bit later about your harmonica playing, and a little bit of the technique and stuff and that. But I just want to mention there was a performance that I saw on YouTube. I think it was yesterday, and it was yourself and Bill, and you're playing on it was a morning TV show.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And just
I
the
mean, when
two
I
of you
mean,
guys.
I did the harmonica solo. Yeah.
Yes. What I wanted to, because we just talked about Bill then, I want to talk a little bit about your harmonica technique there. Now, you had this thing where you're playing the harmonica with one hand, and as you're playing, you're fanning the microphone.
Yeah. It's an old folky trick. In
I've
fact,
never seen that before.
there's a great singer in America. Yeah. Damn it, I could go and get a harp and demonstrate. No, but it used to do that. Look, I mean, some of the show I play through a microphone, a dedicated microphone, a crystal mic, which then goes into a very clever box, which allows me to get a really distorted Chicago sound. Sometimes it goes into an amp. I use a Fender Blues Junior as well. I find that's the one that breaks up those double 6AV valves. Those are the ones, nice. AVAs. And I use a kind of noise filter on it. So I use that on some of the songs, like that's on When I Need You and things like that, to kind of like try and emulate something that's close to the kind of position of a sax would be, in that, which was like in the original record. And then I do a lot of songs just acoustically, so I'm just using the mic that I've got. Which is a very clever DPA mic, by the way, and a very special one that I've got. I basically, you use a lot of technique, so you can be fanning the mic, closing the harmonica down, so you get this muted sound. If you look at old Sonny Terry and Brown and McGee, Sonny Terry used to do all this, and Sonny Boy Williamson, all those guys, they had this. It's a bit like a wah-wah on a guitar, really. Yeah. It's changing, it's filtering the sound, so basically it's changing the tone. So you deaden it down by cupping the mic, cupping the harmonica before the mic, so it's getting a more sort of tighter sound, and then you open it up, But I mean, I grew up playing harmonica. I used to play in folk clubs, and I used to busk on the streets, played with some really good, folkies. I play with Donovan and lots of Bert Jansch and people like that. And I would just sit in again with blues singers, Joanne Kelly, all these people in England. So, John Martin I used to play with. When the folk scene was going in the 60s, and that's how I learned my technique. And I don't know how it first came. I started playing when I was at school. I used to take a train and I'd play along to the train, you play a rhythm to the train. So that's where all that started. And that led me to go into bands. I was a commercial artist. I was a graphic designer in my trade. Yep. But in my spare time, I used to kind of sit in with bands in London. And I've got to tell you, I mean, I'm not name dropping, but I played with, most of the Stones. I played with Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce and all those Zoot Money and Georgie Fame. Played one night with John McLaughlin when he was playing with Georgie Fame, So we'd sit in with all those bands. The Graham Bond organisation, Ginger and Jack were the bass and drums there. And I played with Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman quite a lot when they would play with Alexis Corner as well, as a pickup section. So I kind of knew a lot of people in the business, but I didn't want to get involved in it really professionally because everybody seemed to get ripped off. That was the way it was in the 60s. All those English bands and English acts, they were all penniless. They never they would always have Svengali managers. So, who'd kind of rip them off. Look at the story of the Animals and them and all of, and, you could go back to the Stones and all of those people. So, it wasn't it was an industry where people would take advantage of young guys. That was basically what it was. So I stayed away from it as long as I could, but I found I was getting in trouble art-wise. My concentration was going, and I was getting desperate, and I needed money. So I sort of pretty much was at the bottom of the barrel. And one day I had a nervous breakdown, and I was in London, got out of the studio, tried to pay off most of the guys that were working for me because I had a bunch of artists working for me. And then went and lived on a houseboat for a year. And on the houseboat was another guy who played guitar. And I found out a whole bunch of my old school friends now were in, this was the time of the blues bands like Eric Clapton and John Mayall and Peter Green and, Chicken Shack with Stan Webb. And, it was all that kind of time, that early English blues scene. It was all of us wearing duffel coats and, scruffy hair. And I kind of joined in. I joined in on all of that scene, Ainsley Dunbar Band and all that stuff. Right. And we had a little band, I think we were called Terraplane. And, I went to, and then I jammed with a band called Jelly Bread that had Pete Wingfield, who was the keyboard player, very famous muso in England. And he gave me a few tips and everything. So basically all of a sudden I was working in a factory, living on this houseboat. And every weekend was playing with the band, and it got more and more serious, So I answered an audition, which was held by my co-writer, a guy called David Courtney, and then he used to work for Adam Faith, who was a pop singer in the 50s and 60s, and Adam signed me up, and we went off and made the records, and that's how it all started, really.
Wow!
From the harmonica onwards.
It's well documented. Your story, so I want to
go into all of that.
Yeah, that's cool. So I want to find little gaps in there that we can stop and
absolutely
talk about. And the first thing that kind of come to mind is like, was it like a meteoric rise? Like once you got to that point where you'd recorded that music, did you have any idea at that stage, just kind of how big it was going to get, and
no, not at all.
This is kind of it's kind of a multi-pronged question where once it did start to go, how long did it sort of take, and did you realise what was happening?
Well, it was meteoric because Adam was so powerful. He was so highly respected. Look, the first day I met him, the second day he says, right, you're coming to lunch with me. There's a thing called the RAC, the Royal Automobile Club, where everybody had to dress up in ties and everything like that to even get in the door. So he took me to lunch there, and he says, I've got a special guest for you. I'm not telling you who it is. He was a rough old cockney like that, and in walks Paul McCartney. And he said, do you want any advice? And I said, well, yeah. What mic do you use? And he wouldn't tell me any of that. He said, nah, you've got to find all that out for yourself. He just said, don't cut your hair.
Don't cut your hair.
He said, the look is good. Just stick with that. So I didn't get much out of him. But Adam's influence anyway, we would walk up to the big radio session, at Radio 1 in England, the BBC.
Yeah.
And he, you're not supposed to walk in there at all during a show going on. He would just walk through the door. All the Jobsworths who stood at the door knew him anyway. So, Mr. Faith, of course, come this way. So, we'd walk straight in and we'd be live on air. And he said, take that rubbish off. He'd say to the DJ, put this on this new Leo Sayer. Here he is. This is Leo Sayer. So it was like one of those old kind of Spinal Tap kind of stories, the whole thing. So it happened so fucking quickly. It was ridiculous. Within 4 or 5 weeks, I had a record out. We were starting on the new album, the first album. The first album kind of got curtailed because we went to Roger Daltrey's studio, Roger of the Who, and started recording there. Put his album out first, so mine came out a year later. So that took a little bit of time, but I hit the ground running, and Adam made me do 1,000 shows. He counted them all down. 1,000 shows. I would back Procol Harum, Chicken Shack, Jethro Tull, all these bands. I'd be the opening act, the Small Faces, everybody. It was just an incredible baptism of fire. Nobody knew who I was. I wasn't wearing my famous clown makeup. The first album hadn't come out. They didn't know who I was. So, basically, we'd either succeed or get pelted off stage, with rotten tomatoes or small beer bottles or something, But it was a learning curve, and it taught me a lot about. I worked with some pretty good musicians in those days. I got to say, even though they were as amateur as me, they could play. So I started to learn about, how to direct a band, and that was one of my first skills. That later got me into really good shape in the studio because. After making the first couple of records where I didn't really know very much, when I got to America and worked with Richard Perry, in the time that I, got to working with Steve Gadd, Jeff Porcaro, Larry Carlton, Mike O'Mardian, Greg Fillinganes, Lee Sklar, Russ Kunkel, all these guys. When I got to working with them, I kind of knew how to kind of influence things in a sort of band type of setup. It became very useful in the studio. So I could say to somebody and get away with it, why didn't you play something like this? And they'd pick up on the lines. So even though I don't really play an instrument other than the harmonica, I found out that I could direct things. And I suppose what's been also lucky, I've got perfect pitch. So,
wow.
If I sang a line, it would come, and I mean, I can even, if I start singing a song now, it'll be in the same key that I sing it live, So I've got this elephant's memory of a pitch control,
Yeah, that's interesting you say that about how you were in the studio with sort of directing the musicians, because that was something I was going to ask you, because, being an artist, there'd be a producer in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious as to, is it the producer sort of doing all the organizing or no? But it's cool to hear that.
On those American albums from Endless Flight 1976 on, 3 albums were made with Richard Perry. Now, Richard Perry was he was a god of a producer. He was up there. I mean, he did Carly Simon's, he also Vane. He did all the Ringo Starr albums. He's the last person to actually get all of the Beatles in the studio at the same time on one of Ringo's tracks. So, and the original Steely Dan records, that was him. He was their first producer. He worked with Zappa. He worked with everybody, So he was a pretty powerful figure. And, when I first met him, we were at Loggerheads. We were in disagreement because I wanted to do my own songs and he wasn't interested in me as a songwriter. He just wanted to kind of, he loved the voice. So the voice for him was an instrument. So I was kind of like a Jackie Wilson or something like that, one of these kind of sweet voices, and he just, a sweet soul voice, So he wanted to kind of marry me with some great players and, create an album which was in his mind more than in mine. So when we got started, we had this huge disagreement, and I actually left for the airport. And then he called me back. He said, Leo, reconsider, man. I really wanted to make this work, And I said, well, you weren't my first choice as producer. I wanted to work with Jerry Wexler, not you. And I was really ornery, But he just persuaded me to come back. And the limo turned around on the way to the airport. My wife Janice, my ex-wife Janice, with me. So we turn around. I'm going, let's give it a chance. Yeah, we can hold back the flight home for another day to England, from LA. So we walk into the studio, and at the precise moment, look, he orchestrated this so well. At the precise moment, the song "What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted."
Yeah.
So the first beat is boom, dum, dum, as I walk this land. As I walk through the door, the drummer, and I can't remember who it was, but I can't remember. But the guitarist was Ray Parker Jr. And, the other guitarist was Larry Carlton, and Ralph McDonald, I remember, was on congas, and Lee Ritenour was also on guitar, and this massive band. And I walk into the studio, and as I open the door, come in, Lee. Boom, boom. And I go straight to a microphone that was positioned only a few yards away from the door. It was just like a live session. And I went, as I walk this land of broken dreams. So we instantly found, because of Motown, I guess, I like Motown and he liked Motown, we found some kind of common ground. So we cut the Tears of a Clown Reflections, which ended up on the album, and What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted. So 3 classic Motown-style soul songs that came from that time. And that was how we started. Willie Weeks was on bass, I remember. Yeah, just these amazing musicians. And they're all so nice, I should have been shit scared, really, because here's this guy from England, and I'm working with, my God, the guys who work with Aretha Franklin, B.B. King, they'd work with everybody, all of my heroes, they were the band. And I think on the second week, Jeff Porcaro came in. This is years before Toto, but he is the number one player at this time. He's just been working with Michael Jackson the day before I did the session, so he's talking about Michael, and and I'm thinking, this guy's really good. His time is just different to everyone else I'd ever played with. He's just so relaxed. He looks like he's falling off the drum stool, when he plays. He would sit so low, and he had this little Gresh kit, and he would sit off it really low and almost on the floor. But, all you could see was the wrists. The body doesn't move, and the rest of his arms and legs were just flailing around, making this incredible sound. And I just thought, boy, now that's what you call a drummer. So I was also not only being able to, not intimidated by these guys, able to kind of say to Larry Carlton, why don't you try that? And he'd actually, yeah, that's a good idea, Leo. And I'm thinking, I'm getting away with this. I was also at school, because suddenly you're learning from people who have such skills way ahead of anybody I'd played with in England before that. And way ahead of the abilities of the guys in my own band. So I was I was up such a climb up the ladder from the bottom rung to the top rung, instantly. And I got to say, it became very prolific with those sessions. We had so amazing musicians come in through the door and walk out. We had amazing songwriters come in as well and giving me songs. We had two guys from Elton's band, David Johnson and Nigel Olsson. We had James Newton Howard playing keyboards with us, who now is one of the biggest scorers of music, for films known to mankind. And we had just amazing players. Abe Laboriel came in on the second album playing bass, and man, what a player he was in his lovely old Mexican Goya bass that he was playing at first, modded heavily with decent pickups on it and a Fender neck. But, basically a very humble guy who basically just walked in from Mexico one day and just played better than anybody else. So yeah. Richard knew how to book the A-team. He knew how to book the best players, and he knew how to get them, where I had Stevie Wonder's backing singers, which became very interesting, because one of the days after I was recording with them, they said, hey, let's introduce you to Stevie. So I immediately go to Stevie's studio over at SIR over the other side of town. And he says, I've got these new songs and I'd love you to sing on them, because the girls had played him something that I'd done. And so, wow, this is Stevie Wonder. So I'm singing back up on Love's in Need of Love Today, with those girls. That's me on the record. So there were things like this that would happen, and I'm guesting, playing with Billy Swan, playing harmonica, because he shared the engineer with me, and I played on an album that Steve Cropper was producing, and so we were all off doing other things, and basically as 1977 overtook 1976, Jeff, we brought in a guitarist called Steve Lukather, and I thought he was really great. So my mate Boz Scaggs was looking for a guitar. So I got Steve a job with Boz Scaggs. So and he loved me for that. So the guys from Toto, David Hungate, the original bass player, Jeff Porcaro, Steve Porcaro, Jeff's brother, David Paich, who had also been playing organ on my records, and Steve Lukather became my backing band for a while. And one day they came to me and they said, look, we think we're going to be a band, but we want you to be our singer. And the problem was, I was on Warner Brothers and they were on Columbia, CBS, Sony now, So, and my manager would never allow that. So I just had to say no. But the original Hold the Line is me doing the vocal. They took it off so that Bobby could, I love Bobby, so that Bobby could sing it, of course. And I think he did a better job than me. But that's me going, hold the line, love isn't always on time. So I love that song. And I really wanted to, I thought maybe I could mix my career and be the singer in Toto as well. But no.
That's really cool. So, but did you, when that option came to you, were you thinking, no, it's nice to have that option, and we have this obviously clashing contracts, or was it something you were going, actually, I'm going to look into this, see if I can?
These are the things. They're very. I mean, look, I had my own mission, because I write my own songs, and I always kind of every record that I've wanted to make ever has been something that I've constructed. So as a songwriter and as an ideas person, you think up a concept for something. It's in your head and you want to follow that concept. And I always wanted to be original. So that's kind of, always been the main driving force. But at the other side of it, I'm a singer that everybody seems to recognize. I'm a voice that the musicians love playing with. So they'll sometimes turn my head and I'll think, yeah, fuck it, I'll go and sing some Blood, Sweat and Tears songs or Toto songs. It's always tempting to do that. But mostly I stick to my own mission. And I got to say, when people ask me my favorite thing that I do, I got to say it's writing songs. And I just love songwriting. I love creating ideas. I love the uniqueness of that, that nearly everybody I know that's a great singer often almost has to do cover songs. I don't. I mean, I do them by choice. Every now and then. I mean, we covered last Christmas, we covered Happy Christmas, War is Over, which I sing at the Carols show when Gordy's on drums. But we decided come on, we all love that song. Let's do it. So I'll do a cover every now and then when I need to. But my main mission in life is to create my own songs. The ideas are in my head. I've got to get them out.
Yeah, well, you got the space for it now.
That's true. Well, yeah. I've lucked into finding this amazing house where I am now. So I have this fantastic barn, and I've kind of, with the help of Damien Young, I must say, great live engineer who works with me. Together, he's with Pony. He's got a place called Pony Music, the studio he runs in Melbourne, in Hallam, in Victoria, really. And Damien and I both designed this place so that I could be owner, operator, engineer, and the lot. It's very simplified. There's not much outboard gear. Mostly everything is in the box of the computer. But, I'm able to do pretty much everything myself. And I always thought that I'd like to make an album completely by myself. It's a very stupid challenge for somebody who's got a chance to phone up the best musicians in the world. But I went for it because I thought, well, Vincent van Gogh doesn't get someone in to do the blues and the yellows, does he? Come on. So I went for it and I created Selfie. And now I'm into the second project like this, which is a massive tribute to the Beatles album called Northern Songs. And I just finished off the last 3 of 18 songs. But look, I'm very, very lucky because I work with an amazing engineer who used to be in England. He's John Hudson. And John Hudson used to run Mayfair Studios in England, where the first Dire Straits record was, all the Pink Floyd records. He was the producer and engineer of Tina Turner. All those, What's Love Got to Do with It? All those songs recorded there. All the Bryan Adams hits, recorded there. Tears for Fears, Sowing the Seeds of Love. He's just engineer par excellence. I think one of the best in the world. Incredible mixing engineer. That's his greatest skill. So basically what he does is he helps me finish all my tracks. And at the minute we're working, COVID pandemic style of we send stems to each other and we correct. Just been on the phone to him. I was sending him a graphic of where this song has to be muted and where the level has to drop of a kalimba that I'd written into it. So, it's little details like that, but we're getting there. Between us, we go back and forth and send stuff. We have, I've got a lot of the gear that John uses, I've bought for him. So that is my dedicated, I've got a big SSL rack of instruments and various things. We just got him a nice new Aurum high def 55 EQ, probably the world's best EQ box in the world. That's stunning so that we can do the mastering ourselves now. So we do everything. It's me and John. We're a team.
Do you with that then? Do you get other people in? Meaning, do you record other people or other artists, or this is?
Well, we have done. We found an amazing Melbourne singer called Kiara Hunter, and we produced her. But halfway through, she changed her mind, and because she's young. And suddenly decided she wanted to be more like, a young rapper or something. So her music style has completely changed. There's barely any chord movements any longer. But it used to be she'd write these incredible songs on piano, and then I try and interpret them and put virtual instruments into them. So one day she's going to turn around, and in fact, there's a song on Selfie called "Don't Leave Me." It's the last cut on the album, and that's her song, and I just love that song so much. I had to do it. So I mean, I don't know if I've had time to entertain producing anybody else, but I make the offers sometimes. There's a great little girl band I've met in Belfast, 3 girls who sing on the street, and they do things like Green Manalishi, would you believe, and play it just like, I mean, the guitarist sounds like Peter Green, and man, they're so good. So I want to produce them. So I'm trying to make innovations to say, hang on, you guys send me some tracks, and I'll help embellish it, and we'll help make this really big, because these girls, well, the girls are great looking as well. They've got everything. But at the present moment, they're buskers on the streets of Belfast. Mm. But, you know, there is talent. I'd love to work with more talent. But at the moment, my time is completely filled up with all my own stuff, you know. And this year, with the pandemic as well, I wanted to kind of say something about that, because I have the ability here to make. So I made a song called My City in Lockdown, all about Melbourne, which turned out to be just a rap, you know. Anders is looking like Desperate Dan, but what can you do when there ain't no plan? So, you know, I was doing that. And then I did another song called How Did We Get Here, which is all about, you know, how the virus started. So, and they're online, you know, I've put them out there. They're on YouTube and Spotify and all those things. And you know, I can make videos here as well for them and things like that. So I'm kind of busy.
It sounds like
keeping myself busy. But look, I'm 70 years old, so if I stop, I'm going to bloody well fall over. So I can't afford to stop, you know.
That's really cool. You really make
Inactivity will kill you.
Yeah. I'm curious as to how the whole Grammy Awards machine works, and I always have been. You won Grammy Award. Can you explain what that machine is like? Did you have any idea you were going to get a Grammy Award? What was it like when you got the Grammy Award?
No, it was, well, I mean, that started off, well, that was from Endless Flight. So if that was in 1976. So this is the next year, 77, that you're up for the award. And it was quite a surprise, really. But When I Need You, we thought was going to get the Song of the Year Grammy. It got nominated, but it didn't get there in the end. Another song, I can't remember what it was, something like Don't It Make Your Brown Eyes Blue or something like that, got it. But I was close. But the other award was going for R&B Song of the Year. And that was for me and my co-writer Vinnie Poncia on You Make Me Feel Like Dancing. And so we were up for the composing, you know, award for that song. And ironically, David Paich had been up for it the year before for Lowdown with Boz Scaggs, and got it, because that award is usually given away to black artists. You know, it's usually their fealty. So I remember being at the awards, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody was kind of going on at me, "You stealing all our awards, man." And Smokey Robinson came up to her and said, nah, Natalie Cole, I think it was. And Smokey said, "No, he's as black as we are. He's as black as we are." He said, "Most people, when they heard You Make Me Feel Like Dancing in my community," he said, "thought he was black anyway. So let him have it, you know." So we did get that award. I've got to say I was late to the Grammys, though. I was flying in from England, and I missed the award. And I sat down between Junior Guitar Watson and Count Basie, would you believe? And Count Basie turned to me and said, "Son, you just won yourself a Grammy." And I went, "What?" I didn't even know, you know, because I was rushed from the airport to sit down. The plane was delayed, you know, and got there halfway through the ceremony. But that was a lovely feeling, you know, to be a Grammy winner. But like I say, the way it works is these days it's very much an inside kind of thing. I think that the members of the Academy very much vote between themselves. "Hey, who are you going for?" "Hey." I mean, the other thing I remember that about that year was the year when Fleetwood Mac picked up all the awards for Rumours, right? So basically they picked up a truckload of it. And I remember we went to the awards party with Warner Brothers, so I'm on the same label as them, in America. And Mo Austin, who was the head, came up and said, "Hey, Leo, isn't it great about Fleetwood Mac? You're going to win one of these things one of these days." and his second in command came up and said, "He just did, Mo." I mean, I don't pay too much attention to all of that awards side. I mean, I've never had an Ivor Novello award in England, which is the Songwriters Award. And I think I mean, in a way, I should have done, because shit, I've written so many hit songs. But, you know, I'm out of that radar, really, I think, of those. There's a lot of people who play that game. They hang around with all the people who give the awards, you know, and they make sure that they're in the right, you know, they're recognised, you know, by it. But it hasn't done me any harm. It's a nice thing to have under your name.
I'm curious as to what sort of happens after that. Is it? I mean, obviously you've got a Grammy. You're part of that now, but
yeah,
is it almost like a membership type thing? Like you're kept in the loop of things and.
Not really. Okay. In fact, my Grammy's broken, and I keep asking them for a new one, but they want to charge me $750 every time that I ask them. So, you know, they'll give you a new one, but you have to pay for it. But here's an interesting thing. I did a gig in China about 4 or 5 years ago, just me playing with a band that was already there, and it was at the Olympic Stadium in Chengdu, and it was a Grammy Award winners show. So. Oh God, what's his name? Well, it was Rodney Crowell, and I can't remember all the other artists on it, but they were all massive. Yeah, all bigger names than me. I'm trying to remember his bloody name. Michael, not Bublé. The one with the really. Oh, it will come to me in a minute. Anyway, he's massive. So anyway, they had all these huge American stars, and when they
Michael Bolton.
You got it. Yeah. Interesting guy. And so when they asked the Grammy, you know, they did this big thing in China because China, you know, America wanted to get the Chinese involved in the Grammys. That was the idea. So the head of the Grammys, I can't remember his name either, but he arranged it all personally, you know. So there's a massive show 80,000 people in this stadium in Chengdu. And when they were pre-arranging it, they asked the Chinese, they said, "Well, who would you pick?" And they said, "Leo Sayer." And this guy had completely forgotten about Leo Sayer. I mean, I was, you know, like from another age or something. So they just had to book Leo Sayer. So begrudgingly, someone from the Grammys organization called me and said, "Leo, would you like to come to China?" I said, "Well, yeah, if I'm available." I was a bit busy. You know, and they said, "Well, it's a Grammy Award winners show. Michael Bolton, you know, all these artists. You know, would you like to?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So they paid for the flight and got me over there, and you know, I had a rehearsal with the band beforehand, so they knew all my stuff. An amazing band, mostly Americans actually in there who work in Beijing, but they knew all the songs. You know, so I went and sang 3 songs, and part of it was singing More Than I Can Say, which is absolutely massive out there in China. So at the end of the show, they have me singing More Than I Can Say, and they brought the whole cast on. You know, I had Michael Bolton beside me, and I hand the mic to Michael, and he goes, whoa, yeah. Like, he did not want to do that. You know, I mean, that was, you know, this Leo Sayer guy, I mean, you know, he comes in, you know, and I turned out to be the biggest act for the Chinese in there, so it was quite funny. But since then, Neil Portnow, that was the guy at the head of the Grammys. But since then, he keeps sending me messages, man, and he likes me now. So I don't know. So I could be doing something Grammy winners shows again.
You just say, I'm not coming back unless you give me a new fucking award.
Absolutely.
I ain't paying $750 for it.
It's broken. It's in pieces.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah. The speaker's fallen off the record deck and the needle's gone somewhere, you know.
Right. So you've played with, you know, amazing drummers like Steve Gadd, Jeff Beccaro, Russ Kunkel, Mark Kennedy, Nigel Olsson. List goes on and on. But to me, the most impressive, this is pretty awesome. But you got to play with Animal.
I did get to play with Animal, yeah.
Yep.
I have on my CV plays with the Wiggles and plays with the Muppets. Now, I was very lucky in America when we were doing my very first tour there in 1974. We were in Philadelphia, and we used to do this. A lot of the bands would do this show called the King Biscuit Flower Hour. It was a traditional thing going back right to the 30s or 40s, a radio show, and so they invited me to be on it. And so the idea is you go on with your live band and you go to the studio in Philadelphia, the PBS studios, Public Broadcast Studios. And so I go in there and, we play this gig and it's fantastic. But halfway through the proceedings, I don't know, after sound check or something, I find out that the Sesame Street is shot in the next studio. And since coming to America, I mean, we didn't have it in Australia. We didn't have it in England, Sesame Street. But the moment you get in there, you've got Grover, and Big Bird and all these Cookie Monster and all these kind of characters. Yeah. And I just fell in love with them. It was so, stoners, guys that smoked a lot of dope and took a lot of drugs would just live off the Sesame Street. Oh, man, when I get up in the morning, man, I just want to see Grover. So it was a muso's thing, and we all loved it. And I went next door halfway through the day and met Jim Henson, who is the Muppets and who is Sesame Street. And we got on like an absolute house on fire. So I think I appeared briefly in an episode, but we stayed in touch, all this time. So when the Muppets came to England to do the Muppet Show on TV, Jim contacted me, and I was, he had me up there as they were setting up the whole thing. Leo, who do you think we should book? And his bosses, of course, maybe again, this is a time when Leo wasn't, the big name. So I didn't get invited on to appear on the show, but I did help him contact, people like Rod Stewart and all these different Bette Midler and people like that who were on the show, So I became like a backroom boy on the Muppets show. And eventually a second series, the producers from America and England used to see me all the time. They'd just say, oh, for God's sake, put Leo on the show. And Jim would say, I've been trying to do that since day one. You don't realize how good he is. So I did make my Muppets appearance in the end. And, backstage with them, I used to hang around with Frank Oz. Frank Oz does Animal, and Miss Piggy. And, we'd always be fooling around. In fact, I would sometimes puppet. I didn't do it on TV, but they taught me how to do the puppet. You got these little levers that lift the eyes, so the animal's got eyebrows kind of go up, all this stuff. It was hilarious. But it's one of the nicest things, and one of the nicest friendships I had in my life was with Jim. Jim died of cancer, sadly, and we lost him. He was an amazing man. I remember one night in Los Angeles having dinner with him and Steve Jobs, would you believe? And that's the kind of people that he knew. And Robin Williams was there as well. And having this incredible dinner with these three amazing characters. So, that's the kind of circles that Jim moved in. He was a more important person than people realize, And he's the voice of the frog, of course. hey.
And often imitated, but just never the same.
Oh, that voice, it just gets there every time.
Why are there so many?
I'm
not going to do that again.
It's not being green.
So you're I think you did 2 or 3 songs on.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, 2 guys from my English band were in the Muppets band as well.
Is that right?
Les Davidson, guitarist that I wrote a lot of songs with as well, was with me for about 10 years. He was the Muppets band guitarist. So they used great players, really, really great players, the best in England.
Yeah. So you make me feel like dancing, and I watched that YouTube clip, and that's I don't know who came up with the concept of those dancing birds, but it was really, I felt quite disturbed. It was like the Skeksis off the Dark Crystal, like they were dancing around, and you kind of coming out and dancing in between them, and
it was all Jim. Jim's concept. Yeah, chased by the bear up the tree for When I Need You.
That's funny.
The lumberjack,
and because they were your choir as well. They were your backup singers.
The dancers, the birds that were with me, was three of the major dancers. One of them, absolutely, I can't remember his name now, but he literally was the big star of the Royal Ballet. He was their top male dancer. He danced with Nureyev. He danced with all of, and an amazing guy. And he was the closest bird to me. He was the choreographer of Birds as well. So, look, it was sheer class, the whole thing. I mean, all through my life, I got to work with really, really, I look on my career in some ways of being in the right place at the right time. It was like that when, Steve Gadd and Michael Amardian and Chuck Rainey and Larry Carlton were sitting in the studio waiting for Donald Fagen to come in to do a new Steely Dan track. And Donald phones in the meanwhile Richard Perry and says, I've got a mental block. Would Leo like to take the session? So, that's how You Make Me Feel Like Dancing. It wasn't how it was born, but it's how we kind of ended up with the record, because we married the original jam session, which had Porcaro and Ray Parker Jr. and Lee Ritenour and Willie Weeks and all those guys. We married that with another version. It was the first time I think it been done, really. I mean, 2 reels of tape, and they're trying to get the timing by little yellow marks on them. But Steve Gadd's playing drums along to You Make Me Feel Like Dancing, and his timing is so good. He felt really bad, I've got to say, about usurping Jeff. He said, how am I going to apologize to Jeff? I said, I'll do it for you. So I phoned Jeff and I said, we're at the producer's workshop with Bill Schnee and we're putting down the drums. He said, what do you mean putting down the drums? I said, with Steve Gadd. He said, fine, carry on. He was thrilled that Steve was there, and they became great friends.
Yeah. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. As you know, the Gig Life podcast is free. You don't have to pay anything ever. But if you find the value in the Gig Life podcast, you can donate or leave a tip. Go to thegiglifepodcast.com, click on that donate button and give as little or as much as you like, and just know that anything you give will go back into creating great content for this podcast. All right, back to the episode. I just want to give a shout out and a mention to Robin Flans and her book.
Yes. She's a great writer, Robin. She's written many books, and she was very close to the Toto Boys, and particularly Jeff. And she wrote this beautiful book and invited me to be a part of it. Yeah, we were very close, me and Jeff, while we were working together. We got really, really, really close, and he lived just around the corner from me, so. We used to hang out a lot, and I don't know, our personalities matched. He was a very lively guy, very speedy like me, very excited about life, and just good to hang with, And we used to go to the movies together, and, we often dated a couple of birds together as well. So we'd have some fun. And and in the studio, I don't know, it was something telepathic when we worked together. I was in a booth. Or in this kind of like it's almost an ante-room between the control room and the main studio. And I had a big window, I had a little porthole window going into the studio, but I had a bigger window looking onto the control room. But I used to kind of position myself very near this porthole, because right at the other side of that was Jeffrey looking at me. Right. So Jeff and I used to literally give each other cues. He would lift his head when he was going onto the ride cymbal, would you believe, for a bridge section or a chorus. And I would know to change my dynamic. And I've got to say, on Endless Flight, most of the vocals, and on Thunder in My Heart, most of the vocals are live, and Jeff's performance is live. The two of us, they'd overdub a lot of the other stuff, but we two were like metronomes. We worked together, and he used to say to people, he said, I'm his favorite singer, because basically the way we worked together was just fantastic. It was like telepathy, Our timing was such. We locked, and that made us become great friends. That's why they wanted me and Toto. I mean, it's Jeff that lobbied for me. He said, I want my mate Leo in there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm very honored, and I miss him a lot. I often think of him. He was just one of the great people I met in America, amongst many others, of course. But he didn't deserve to go when he went, because basically he had so much more in him. He had a sense of time and a sort of grace in his playing that was like no other. I think best drummer I've ever worked with. Sorry, Steve Gadd, but the best was Jeff. And Mark Kennedy. I'd have to apologise to Mark Kennedy because I'll tell you what, I rate Mark Kennedy as one of the greatest drummers I've played with as well. And he's here in Australia and he's a gem. And his timing is outrageous. Great. These are drummers that singers love to work with. I bumped into Michael Jackson sometime along the thing and we talked about Jeff and Michael just said, the guy is incredible. He said, usually I run through the song just me and Jeff together. Just to get the rhythm, get the groove. And that's how they use. So he saw that as well. He had that as well. He Jeff was recognized by many people for that.
Yeah. And still talked about today because here we are.
Yeah. These guys have had an incredible influence on the way music is played now. I think that period of like mid-70s to the first 2 years of the 80s are probably the most influential years of players, not only in America, in England too. You think of people like Mark King, bass player with Level 42. You think of, for musicians we're talking about here.
Yep.
You think of like Joe Sample on piano with Stuff, and you think of the bass players, Abe Laboriel and so many amazing. Who's the guy from Earth, Wind and Fire?
Verdine White.
Yeah, Verdine. Whoa, some of these guys, the brothers Johnson. Some of these guys, and Sly and Rufus, and with Chucker as a singer. They influence the way everybody performs now. I every time I hear a new girl singer with a band in a funk band, it's Chucker. And every time I hear a drummer in a funk band, it's Jeff. And, it's Willie Weeks or Abe Laboriel or Chuck Rainey on bass with all of those tracks. And some of those guys, of course, are still playing. Lee Sklar is still, working with Phil Collins when Phil works. They're still there. They're the biggest influence to the music. And that's why we're chatting today, because it's all about the fact that I was there at that time working with those guys and I saw it firsthand, and it was incredible, and every now and then I'll have a chat with someone like Boz Scaggs about the old days and we'll just say, man, were we lucky. We just had the school of rock in those days.
Yeah. You mentioned Lee Sklar just before. I don't know if you've seen his. He's got a YouTube series where he just.
Yes, I do. Yeah, he did something on. Funny enough, he did something on "Can't Stop Loving You." Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he has to say nice things about the Phil version, but it's not the way it was written. But that's cool.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But I love working with. He used to drum. He had a drummer, Russ Kunkel, who always played with Lee. They did a lot of the James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt records. Peter Asher used to use them as the go-to team, the two of them, and boy, when they played together, they were tight. And he's a lovely character, Lee.
Oh, what's the name of their Waddy Wachtel?
Yeah, well, Waddy and Lindsey Buckingham used Richard set it up. I didn't really know much of Waddy, but I knew Lindsey from Fleetwood Mac, and they became my two guitarists when we did an album was basically mostly country. The third one I did with Richard in 1978 called Leo Sayer, because nobody could think of a title. But that's got Can't Stop Loving You on it, and which has got Lee and Waddy, and Raining My Heart, and La Boogaruga, which was Andy Fair with a Lowe's song. It's got some cool tracks on it. And we did a Jackson Browne song, just me and Lindsey together, called Something Fine. He's doing all the acoustic and I'm doing the vocals. And that was a beautiful thing working with him. And Waddy and I are still great mates. Every time he comes to Australia, we hang out. We spend a couple of days together. We go and eat ice cream and walk on the beach and things like that. And whenever I'm in LA, I'm always in Waddy's band. There's a couple of guys from, and sometimes Keith Richards turns up, which is really cool. So I get to hang or play a harmonica with Keith, which is one of my great thrills, because nobody plays the blues like Keith. Man, he's just great.
The Section, that's the name of their group. The Section.
The Section is the group. Yeah. Yeah,
I had to I had to Google that while you were talking.
Mike Campbell used to come down and play with us as well, which is, I think, and I've got a feeling that's how he got the nod for Fleetwood Mac, because, you know, being close to Waddy, who was close to Stevie, so it got a feeling that's how Mike got in there, because Mike used to play with the section. And boy, what a guitarist he is. You know, famed for the Tom Petty stuff and everything, but a great artist in his own, a great songwriter in his own right, you know, as Tom always pulled him up to, you know, to be. He always said, you know, without Mike, I wouldn't have done a lot of these songs. If you follow Mike's blog, it's really good. Mike Campbell. That is absolutely fantastic. And every day he comes up with something different, and he just plays these lovely, soulful old guitars, and an amazing musician, pretty good singer as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, you said you did those couple of albums, 2-3 albums with that sort of group of musicians. So what changed where you couldn't get those guys back for the next albums?
Well, we kind of did, because Richard Perry just got, you know, he always gets itchy. If he's not having hits, then you're out, you know. I only want to work with people who have hits.
Oh, right.
I tell you, just that kind of mentality. That was cool. We did 3 albums. Cost me a fortune as well, because he had to get, you know, his producer's share and everything like that. And I think that when we got to 1978, 76 we did an album, 77 we did an album, 78 we always did it at his studio as well, Studio 55 Melrose, in LA. And I think both of us needed a change, you know. And in 1979, my old co-writer David Courtney had come over to America for a few years by that time, and he'd been making some great records. He'd been producing people. He turned into quite a producer. I mean, he was co-producer on the early stuff with me. And suddenly his right-hand man, Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper. So when they asked me, all of them together, Leo, would you like to come and do an album with Dave producing? I went, shit, yeah, absolutely. Because I knew Duck and Steve were going to be on it. You know, Booker T and the MGs, you know, the great string pullers of Booker T and the MGs. So
the Stax guys.
So we made an album. I brought Steve Lukather and Jeff into that album as well. And Abe played on a few tracks. Chuck Rainey I brought in as well, and Ray Parker Jr. Ray and I wrote a few songs, you know, we ended up putting one on the album, but we wrote quite a few songs together. Ray was starting Radio, his band then, at that time, and just before he, of course, hit pay dirt with Ghostbusters. You know, so and then you know, Ray's another one, and just an amazing player. Ray is the guitarist on, you know, I Wish It Would Rain, The Temptations. He was Stevie Wonder's guitarist for many, many years in Stevie's band. You know, live, I had Reggie McBride in my band as well, who was from Stevie's band, who's the bass player on Superstition, you know, and all of those tracks. So there's this alumni of really great players. I brought in Billy Payne, my old mate from Little Feat, for that album here as well. That and Al Cooper. We had Al Cooper, right. You know, the Al Cooper. You know, he wrote a song for me on that for that album, and you know. So the next album I did with, even though it's not very well known, it's called Here. It came out in 1979. The list of musicians on that album is as good as anything from the Richard Perrys. And then the next album I did, well, I went back to England and I worked with Alan Tarney. We did More Than I Can Say, you know, and of course that went very, very well. But that was a different kind of way of recording because Alan mostly played all the instruments himself. We did it all in England. And then I get a call from Warner's, and Arif Mardin wants to work with me. Wow, you know, this is the guy who produced my favorite artist of all time, Donny Hathaway, and also with Aretha and the team with Jerry Wexler and everything. And so I meet with Arif, who's an incredibly intelligent man, the guy who produced the Bee Gees, you know, Staying Alive and everything. And he also made the first records of Danny O'Keefe and John Prine. So this guy had so much width in his ability. He was Chaka Khan was his neighbor staying downstairs. He made all the Rufus records. You know, I mean, how many records did Arif make? You know, so suddenly, and at this time in my life, I was really interested in making records myself. So I was going to learn from the master, and I told him that at the start. I said, Arif, I want to be around at every moment of this record, and I want to pick on some of your skills. And he said, that's great. We got on really, really well. So I used to sit with him. We'd have dinner, and he'd talk about how I was going to comp this vocal, or how he was going to kind of like mix this drum part with something else he'd thought of, and how he was going to arrange the strings. And, you know, so I was in the inside track. I got to say, my record called World Radio that I made in 83 with Arif, again, which had Steve and Jeff and all the usual faces on it. That record, you know, for me was my learning curve of how to be a producer. And he didn't mind. He showed me everything. You know, he showed me everything. Introduced me to some of the greatest engineers at Atlantic Studios. We made half the record at Sunset Sound. You know, I got to work with Michael Jackson's engineer, you know, and I worked with some amazing people and met some amazing people through Arif, you know. You know, and had incredible singers on there as well. You know, remember that record Shakespeare's Sister? You know, yeah. The girl Marcella Detroit, who also wrote Marcy Levy, as she originally was. She was my BV on that. And there's never been a higher singer. You know, she had a voice that is just like, wow, about 50 octaves above me. So I learned a lot from her as well. Marcy became a great friend. She wrote Lay Down Sally for Eric Clapton.
Is that right?
So she's a great songwriter as well, yeah.
Wow.
She was a groovy guitarist as well. Nobody ever saw that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She still is. I was lucky just to, you know.
Oh, man. Sounds like you made your luck, though. I mean, maybe at the start you might think it was luck, but you kept producing, man, like that.
Yeah.
These people aren't going to come and work for you if they didn't think you're any good.
But I think a lot of the relationship with people is about friendship, conversation, generosity, gratitude, expressing all that, communicating is terribly important. And I've got to say, all that while I was working with these great players, I'd have to add Greg Fillinganes and you know a few other great people as well. All the time I was working with them, we were friends. We'd hang out. You know, they weren't just guys who turned up for a session. You know, they were mates. You know, I'd go and get drunk with David Paich. You know, and we'd share a lot of things. He'd play me his songs, and you know, I'd play him mine. I put him together with Bernie Taupin, who, you know, wrote the lyrics for Elton John, and we, you know, I had David and Bernie writing songs for Alice Cooper, would you believe? You know, so which they did. You know, so there were all sorts of interesting connections there. You know, I got to work with great arrangers like Gene Page and Paul Buckmaster. You know, also in that thing. So, you know, the levels of it all. And, you know, I remained friends with Richard right up until the last time I was in LA. You know, I went down to Richard's house and we talk about the old times again. So I think it's all about having relations. How about treating people well, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I love the guys. See, here's the thing. My first manager, Adam Faith, told me one thing that I've never forgotten. Never be friends with musicians. They're the scum of the earth. They play for you, and that's it. So I vowed at that moment to be different. And I have been different all my life. And got to tell you, my best friends in the world are people like Mark Kennedy, Elliot Henshaw, my drummer in England, you know, Dave Day, my guitarist over there, Paul Burton, my guitarist here, you know. They're my mates. Mitch Cairns, you know, Bill Risby. They're my mates. They're my best friends. We relate to each other, and that friendship always gets me guaranteed incredible performances from all the people who play with. They step up their game, you know, when they play with me. They don't shirk. They don't just give me their money's worth. They give me 150%, and that's because we're friends. And I do the same thing for them. Any day. So the most important people in your lives could be your lovers, but they're also your musicians.
Yeah. Nice. Nicely said. What prompted your move to Australia?
Well, I always loved it out here. And I think I'd got corralled in England into something that, England, the British music scene is all about here today, gone tomorrow. Send me someone new. This one's finished.
Okay.
It's a turnover. And
Right.
and I was very much saddled with, he's from the 70s. We wouldn't give him a record deal today. And I wanted to carry on making music. I had new songs, new things I wanted to do. And I could do that in Australia because I'd come down here and play people some new songs and they go, great, let's go in the studio. Whereas I go into England and say, you've had all your hits, Leo. I don't see it. It wasn't even as if they're listening to the music. The funny thing is they're
Right.
kind of they're just putting you into a box. And that's really sad, but that's how it is, And
And it's still like that, is it?
still very much, it's a boys' club there,
Okay.
If you don't hang out at Elton John's house or Bob Geldof's house, forget it. Particularly for pop stars, I'm not talking musician now. I'm talking, a celebrity. So the celebrity thing is very much judged on who you hang with and all that sort of stuff. And honestly, I'm too busy making music most of the time. I don't have time for all that shit. So, but I got to a point, in 2003, I think it was, where I thought, where am I going? I'm now headed in, I'm in my 60s and I want to do something with my life, or just coming up to 60. And I thought, if I go to Australia where people love me, I can reinvent myself down there. And that's what I did. And that's what I have done. And I've found I've never been as busy in my life and I've never felt so motivated, because what Australia has brought me, apart from great music scene, let's not deny this. Australia has the most incredible music scene. Talent here. Russell Morris, Jimmy, Joe Camilleri. Oh my God, it just goes on. Jeff Duff, the talent here is ridiculous. And that's because it's a very positive place. Also because I think there's space here. So people can dream big and get away with it. They're not hemmed in by, oh no, I'd never do that. That kind of thing. The English definitely. Oh no, no, not me, no. So here's a take a chance place, and you see that from all the bands, that have been here, from like Midnight Oils to Skyhooks to bands that just took incredible risks. And just did something, shocked themselves in and that's what we were doing when I started off. So why not be in the place where all that happens? That's what I was doing with the Piero in 1973. You're going and doing something that nobody expects and you're doing it in a completely different way. Oh, I'm going to turn off that phone. Sorry. So sorry about that.
That sounded like it was ringing on every device out of every speaker.
I think it's linked through to this laptop. I tend to deaf it in the studio, but this time I didn't.
Yeah.
So I think the vibrancy here is what attracted me, and I do love Australia, and I love Australians, and I think my character is very Australian in some ways. So, I'm probably prouder of being a citizen here than I am in England, especially after Brexit.
Oh yeah, jeez. So how's that going to affect you now, Brexit?
Well, they're saying there's been a new ruling that, if I go back and do this Irish tour, any truck over 3.5 tons, I don't know how many kilos that is, but we can try and work it out and sort of estimate. It's a small truck, Any truck that size or over is only allowed to drop off twice out in any place in Europe. That's Ireland is Europe, you see now. So our Irish tour, the guys can't they can only unload the gear and load it up twice. Actually, they can only do it, they can only do 2 loads. So they'll load into one gig and load it out. So I'm going to have to use pickup equipment. And we don't do that. We take a lot of we take our own consoles, own microphones. The guys we bring all the guitarists, amps and everything. So I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, so it's not a good prospect at the moment. I think things have to get very well sorted, but probably will do. But at the moment, this stupid government has just left musicians in the lurch. But then our government over here isn't much better, is it? I mean, the arts are the most ignored factor.
Yeah.
I mean, Australia is all about sport, isn't it? It's not, it's not about us guys. But I think we bring more revenue in than sports people. They certainly do in England. The English music business is huge. I mean, you have to factor in the Beatles and the Stones and people like that, and Paul McCartney and Elton John. But, the English music industry puts more into the economy than any other industry because there's no manufacturing anymore. So how can you ignore them? And the film industry everything, actors, writers, it's crazy. And the same in Australia, the same parallel. Here we have, incredibly talented people who are not only in music, but in all of the arts that are just being left out. I suppose the problem is that people in the arts usually are a little bit more left-wing. So when you've got right-wing governments, they don't want anybody questioning them. So they'll stymie us guys. And, there you go. End up with Ted Nugent.
Very good.
And Mike Love, the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
That's why Joe Biden having Lady Gaga, I'm not a Lady Gaga fan, but I can understand how important that is because she is such a Democrat. And she's a good girl for doing that. So Biden is going to have her singing at the inauguration. You see the way it kind of bends, don't you?
Right. What's your take on social media and how have you embraced it? And were you resistant to it at the start?
Never.
Cool.
I'm a communicator.
Cool.
So I'm a communicator. I want to share my ideas with everybody. I get my adrenaline from landing ideas on other people and if you like, communicating and listening. And, I lie in bed at night, not able to go to sleep, and I'm on Twitter and poor Donald Trump. I mean, it's so sad.
No.
Fucker.
No, man.
But anyway, you can keep that in.
I'm going to.
but no, I watch the world through that, and I think it's wonderful. Not just music, but I think it's fantastic. But we do have a chance to express ourselves. When you might know some guy down the road who's plays keyboard or guitar, and and he's always dreamed of being a pop singer. Well, he can go on to bloody YouTube now and do it, and he can share something. And who knows, he may get so many hits. It's a better option than bloody Pop Idol or all that rubbish. I hate The Voice and all those shows because that's all synthetic. It's all,
that was another question I had.
You don't even know if the guy can sing or play his guitar because there'll be someone behind the screen. He's miming to them, I don't trust those shows at all. That's just television bullshit, really. Yeah. But so I think social media has been fantastic. How many great bands have we seen come up through social media? Great bands, like really groovy, fantastic musicians that have put projects together. I can't name anybody off my head, but off the top of my head, but the ones I'm talking about. And we see them come up, and all of a sudden, we love what they do, and they're even going on tour out of that. And they were just a bunch of guys that decided to, let's not bother to talk to a record company. Let's just make the film ourselves and put it out ourselves, So I think that direct side, social media is so important. I think it's a part of our lives, very important. Those people that knock it are people who don't understand it. They don't understand how to use it, and they don't understand that it can be abused. Of course it can be abused. You have to accept in life that there are as many bad things as good things. We love cars, but cars kill people as well, Yeah. So what do? Do you say, I don't love cars because my neighbor got run down? No, we carry on. We work with it, and we make the best we can for ourselves out of it. So Facebook and Twitter, I think they're great vehicles. YouTube, Pandora in America. I've got my own Spotify artist playlist, and it's fantastically powerful. Because, they give me a report on how much I'm getting seen. And, of course, with getting My City in Lockdown, How Did We Get Here, those tracks out this year. I've been seeing the feedback. The feedback's amazing. It's keeping me alive. It actually affects my record sale. My record sales have gone huge since social media has been out there because I've used it.
That's fantastic.
No, I think it's really good. I think we should all be really positive about it. It ain't killing live music. Live music is being killed by coronavirus at this moment anyway, but it's not killing live music. It actually makes people want to see it more and experience it more. I think the two things go together. It's not, if it's killing the record business, maybe that's not a bad thing actually in the current model, because it needs to change, it needs to kind of be more all inclusive. Engineers and producers and musicians need to get paid as well as artists. That's one thing, very important. Yeah. And that is starting to happen because musicians and engineers and producers are taking the business into their own hands. So this is good.
If you were in charge of Spotify, right, what would you do to change that model to benefit artists?
Well, I'd say to my shareholders, you've made enough money now, it's time to give some back. That's the first thing, because we have seen that there's some very, very ridiculously wealthy people. I don't think another Ferrari is going to help them do the job better. So I would say give a little bit more back. And I think that those platforms could be sponsoring artists as well. And that I think would be really good. I'd like to see Spotify maybe having a competition kind of element to it. So, new bands of the week, the one that gets the most feedback, the most plays, that is an unsigned band, should then be given a bit of a budget to make better music, or better facilitate, make it easier for them to make their music for the next month. And so the competition rolled. And I think that would be really good. And I don't see that element in there. I don't see that backing, in there. And maybe to create, because of music is so many genres. We think that jazz is important, but, where are the new Pat Metheny's, and they're out there, but there's no platform for them, there's no labels for them. So I think that Spotify and those kind of companies could split themselves up to help the outside genres, indie rock and punk and things like that are all still being made. Folk, folk music, acoustic music, jazz, really old style music, like old blues. They could be factoring in labeling all of that and getting that a better platform, getting it out there, what's going on and what's good. Unfortunately, I think the problem with a lot of these platforms is that they're not now, just like record companies, being run by music people. They're being run by accountants or people who want to get rich quick. You know what I mean? So they have to actually get their A&R shit together. And I think that's the first thing I'd do. I'd get a David Geffen or someone like that instantly involved in those platforms and put some real A&R. There's a great guy called Ted Cohen that I used to work with in Warner's in America. And shit, they should be getting him in there. He'll tell them what's a good act and what's a good act, what's an act that would develop as well. That's an important thing. Nobody's talked about artist development for many years. And that's really sad, because we had A&R people, artists and repertoire in record companies, who would help us get better and better at making the music and helping us reach our mission and make better and better records as we went on. That's what I had around me. And that helped me, since the 90s, I had nobody and I was flailing. So I had to reinvent myself, as we all have had to do. But I think it would be great for young artists coming out today if they knew that there was someone who was going to guide them and help them to get really good. Because the quality is important, You want to have more guitarists that can play like The Edge. You want to have, that thing he does with the thick pick. You want to have people who know technique, and you want to see that passed on. And, I would have Brian, The Edge, straight in there as an A&R man, straight away, instant, no talk. I'd have Ry Cooder in there as an A&R man. I'd have Randy Newman in there, people like that, Terence, Trent Reznor, people like that. You have them in there straight away, man, because they're the people that know. Mike Campbell, they know what it takes to make great music, and how adventurous and how brave and how good you have to be, and how you have to learn your craft. There's no excuses.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the 90s, and that was a bit of a tough era for you, and went through some legal stuff and all that, which we don't have to get into. But how did you pull yourself out of that state? Did you know all that stuff? Did you feel it sort of coming towards the end of the 80s? Of
course. Every artist gets abused in some way. I mean, you know, my original manager, who I always sing the praises of, also ripped me off rottenly. You know, Adam Faith stole money from me from day one, really, and you know, also one time I heard that he burnt all the multi-tracks so that nobody could remix my stuff. Actually, that hasn't turned out to be a bad thing, because I don't have to live with all terrible remixes of my songs, and the only ones that they can remix, they have to use the original, you know, 2-track. So Thunder in My Heart Again, you know, that remix that came out, went to number one in 2000.
You did it right out of that.
Yeah, that was very cleverly made from just a stereo recording, you know. So things added to it, a bit slowed down, you know, filtering and all that sort of clever stuff. So I don't know. It's tricky to come up with the absolute answers to a lot of these questions, you know, because when you're being ripped off and when you're being sort of destroyed and prevented from working, as I was in the 90s, I couldn't afford to do anything. I was almost bankrupt, you know, for taking on lawyers that were bloody useless anyway, and trying to sort of fix contracts which were unfixable. I should have, if I'd have known now, in hindsight, I'd have just packed everything up, walked away, retired for 6 months, and then come back. That would have been the most sensible thing. Pack up all the companies, get out of there, you know, and then just make some music in the background and then come back. You know, kind of, which is basically, when you think of it, Cat Stevens, you know, reinventing himself as a Muslim artist. That's what he's done, you know, and he did that. You know, who's the South African singer that they love so much over here? Well, no, they love him from South Africa. South American guy who did the songs all about dope and everything. Oh, God, what's this? They made the movie about him. Searching for Sugarman. Yeah, you know that guy? Yeah. See, someone like that just goes missing and then they come back. You know, you don't try. And I tried to carry on with all these people, and that was stupid. So sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. But I think the way I did deal with it is I just went back to songwriting and, you know, created music. And, you know, that's Selfie is full of a bunch of the songs on Selfie are what I came up with in the 90s and couldn't get a record deal for. So, you know, you get your revenge in the end. There's a song Under the Surf, I remember, you know, and I remember this A&R guy in England just saying, look, it's an absolute crap song. It just says nothing, goes nowhere. And, you know, just when I was putting that track out last year or the year before, everybody said, oh, my God, what a song. So I knew that at the time. So you have to, what is it? Bob Marley said, you got to push on through. You know, no woman, no cry. You got to push on through. And you do have to push on through. You have to have incredible belief in yourself in this business. As a singer, as a musician, as an artist, you know, you just have to have amazing belief. If you know you're good, you know you're good. Yeah. Yeah, true. They can't tell you you're not. And eventually you will get your way. Patience is a virtue, you know. Yeah. Yes. But I'm sitting good now, you know. I mean, I've nobody telling me what to do. I've just done one of those rights deals that you're hearing Neil Young has done and Bob Dylan's done. I'm sharing my royalties with an American company. I'm not going to tell you the sums and the figures and the deal, but I got to tell you, it's left me very comfortable. And plus, do I want to, you know, I'd rather have them. They're going to push me very hard in America, and I'd rather have them pushing than just sit here waiting for the royalties to come in. So I'm quite happy to share that with them. It's a company called Primary Wave. They just signed Stevie Nicks as well, and almost at the same time, they've got Bob's catalog. They've got some Ray Charles. They've got some amazing catalogs, you know, and they really work these catalogs because they have outside investors who really want to make money out of us artists. So the impetus is good when you think about it. And the other thing is the reason why big names like Neil and Bob have signed up to do this thing is that the Americans Patents Office want to kind of steal all our copyrights and put them in the public domain. So I think Bob, looking at his life's work, didn't want to see that happening. So he's done a partnership with Universal, which I think is very good. And he will always be the rights holder for Bob Dylan. And he can probably now afford to buy the state of California. And I wish he would.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really cool. Now, you talked earlier on, and I also read it as well, that you were into art and graphic design and that kind of stuff.
I do a lot of record cover designs, Bob Marley and did many of those.
That was my question. Have you ever used those art skills to design album covers or sleeves or?
Yeah, I still get involved in it now. Selfie, I did. I think the cover of I did all that by myself, and I got an artist friend of mine to help finish off. And some of the guys at Demon Records in England, the record company I use, they've got some good guys up there. So they helped put it together. They got a little design studio, and they're good friends of mine. The guys, I met them last time I was in London. They said, anything, Leo, just throw it over to us. We understand what you're trying to do. So, I'm a rank amateur compared with the techniques that they use these days. But I can put it together, get the photographs done and all that stuff. Yeah.
Do you still like to draw?
I can't draw anymore.
Okay.
Since that nervous breakdown that I mentioned, I think that I lost the ability to do it. I went white paper blind, as they call it, very much at the time. But I take photographs all the time, and I've still got my eye. I guess my visual compositional sense is as good as it ever was, and I love designing stuff. But I can't really be a freeform artist any longer. That all left me. But one time I was an illustrator.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So when you say, what did you say? What did you call it? White paper blind?
White paper blindness. Yeah, you look at a white sheet of paper and you go, "Oh, I'm going to have a blackout."
Oh, I've never heard that before. So, do you think that because you had that nervous breakdown, when you have that thought of going to draw something, it takes you back to that?
Yeah.
That emotion, that emotional feeling.
Is that a creative brain will find, especially over a long period of time. Look, it's 50 years next year since the very first record. Over a long period of time, you will diversify and you will find different strings. Like you're doing a podcast now, and I bet your usual job is playing, right? Yeah. But now you find yourself kind of moving into another area, and other areas, and we all do that. So I guess suddenly the need to make music was greater than the need to paint art.
Okay.
And that kind of took over. And the need to express myself by writing songs rather than, say do abstract paintings or something, or write poetry, the need to write songs was suddenly really banging on my ear. I couldn't think of anything else I needed to do more. I think need is a good word, because sometimes, you have the choice to do anything you like when you're a creative person. Yeah. And honestly, I've been self-employed all my life. Right. I've never really ever worked. I've taken few pay slips home in my life.
Wow.
I've always been my own boss. So you've got this dilemma of what am I going to do today? Like the taxi driver, who gets up in the morning and he owns his cab and he owns his business. And he says, do I feel like driving today? Yeah. But if he doesn't feel like it, he actually can take a day off.
Yeah.
To be your own boss is a fantastic thing. And I feel for anybody who has to be the boss, that has to be bossed around by anybody else, because that's my world. But I've had to work hard, over the years, especially the early years, to get that right to be my own boss. Sure. So that makes you very disciplined. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think I'm a very disciplined person. I know that if I've got to do something, it's no good lying in bed. It's not going to fix it. So it's made me very active. Yeah. And I've achieved. I realize I'm writing my book about it all at the minute, and I'm about 95,000 words in, and I'm only in 1986. I've still got a long way to go.
You've gone backwards, because I was listening to another podcast that you're on, and you were at 1992. So you must have ripped out a few chapters, have you?
I was researching up to 92.
Yeah.
I've done all the research, and I've done laid it all out, but I'm detailing into 1986. Because funny thing is, every now and then I discover one of my old musicians, and I'll do a Zoom meeting with him, and you know, my old drummer Stephen Jackson, for a lot of the time I was with him in England. He set me right on a few things that I'd forgotten. So, you know, I've been going back into that and going, oh, no, it was him that we took, you know. Yeah. You know, so I want to try and get it as accurate as possible. And that's important, you know.
Do you have an idea on when you might get that finished? Have you got a plan?
Yes, really, I'm looking at the next 2-3 months.
Oh, wow.
I'm just finishing off this Beatles album project I was telling you about, Northern Songs. We're nearly finished. We're in the last 3 songs now. I've just got to deliver them to John for mixing. And I've just about done all the parts. So as soon as and that's another week and a half away, I think, or 2 weeks away. Then, of course, we'll have to, you know, observe the mixes and master it and everything and make sure we're happy. But I'm going to be getting onto the book again in about 2 weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm doing a lot of research in the background, because I always think of something and go, hey, what was that time we had that surfing guy over to the Middle East and he showed everybody up? He was one of our roadies. And then I asked somebody about it. Oh, no, that was Bruce. He's now the head of Westlake Sound in America. And I go, what? You know, so it's amazing how, like, all these, you know, a lot of the people that were in my life have become huge successes all over the world, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's a journey of discovery. Rediscovering your life is fascinating. I recommend it.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the start of the 2021 chapter, because there'll be that part about this.
Yeah, definitely.
There's this podcast I went on in early, kicked off my year going on the Gig Life podcast with Stevie Taylor.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of doing one myself soon. I've had a few offers of, there's a French company that's got its own, you can have your own channel and everything, Lumiere or something like that. So,
awesome.
You know, they've offered me some sort of deal on it, but it's just finding the time to do it. At the minute, I'm just, every waking moment, I'm at the control desk or the keyboard, you know, working out, or at the microphone, working out the end of this project that I'm recording at the moment. But you know, you get stuck on one thing. But I think that I could tell my stories. It would be quite interesting, and also maybe talk to other people. You know. So
that's cool.
It's an interest. Look, we're all communicating. What you're doing there is just fantastic, man.
Thank you.
It's really good, and it's a great conduit for musicians at this time as well, because a lot of us that, you know, are stuck and stymied for what to do next. You know, but I'll send you some people.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd
man.
Be great. If you need a co-host for the Leo Sayer podcast,
you got the gig already.
Yeah, awesome. If you need
going on today's performance, man. Yeah.
Oh, nice, awesome. This is my audition. No, I'm just kidding.
Great. We realise we've talked for about 3 hours now.
About an hour 40. Oh no, because we talked we spent half an hour trying to get the tech right.
That's true. True. Yeah, you have to right off, just like every production that one does, you know.
Yeah.
It's like when you're playing the drums. It took them 4 hours to get the mics in the right position. Then we only had 4 minutes left to play.
And then another 2 hours to wait. 2 hours for the bass player to tune his bass.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Get the wife out of the studio.
Yeah, that's it. Leo Sayer, man, thank you so much. This has been great. I've had a blast.
My great pleasure. I've really enjoyed every minute.
Thank you for sharing your stories, and man, looking forward to.
Let me know when this is put together, and I'd love to. I'll share it with lots of people as well.
Brilliant, man. That'd be great.
Onwards and upwards.
All right, Leo. Thanks, my man.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, mate.